name is Mary Biddle-Koenig. I'm the Assistant Director of the Smith Enterprise Risk Consortium, or SERC as we call it, at the Robert H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland. I'd like to welcome you to the June webinar in our Risk Leadership Series, which is brought to you by SERC, ZRG Partners, and the Office of Executive Education at the Smith School of Business. As many of you already know, our webinars are focused on top-of-mind risk topics that vary from month to month. We've covered everything from issues and challenges in cyber insurance markets to the Basel III Endgame, to pharmaceutical supply chain risks, to climate change issues, to just name a few of our topics. Today, we are thrilled to have Dr. Amanda Moeller from Northrop Grumman with us to talk about responsible AI, harnessing best practices. To start us off, I would like to introduce you to Rob Iamazzo. Rob is a managing director of ZRG Partners and currently leads ZRG's global enterprise risk and analytics practice. We have partnered with Rob for many years to bring you the Risk Leadership webinar series, and I'm pleased to turn it over to him to kick us off today.
Mary Biddle, thank you. And thank you, Amanda and Anand, for agreeing to be part of this very topical dialogue around ethical AI, responsible AI. Amanda, of course, being responsible for all of AI at Northrop Grumman, and Anand, who's currently a professor at the Robert H. Smith School of Business, previously dean of the Business School at Imperial College, and a co-academic advisor, if you will, or academic advisor, I should say, to the Smith Enterprise Risk Consortium, of which I'm proud to say I'm an advisory council member. So I'll turn this over to you, Anand and Amanda, but just want to thank you again for agreeing to have this conversation today.
Okay, thank you, Rob. I just want to remind everybody the topic of today's webinar is on responsible artificial intelligence, harnessing the best practices. We are really delighted to have with us Dr. Amanda Moeller. Amanda is the Chief of Responsible Technology for Northrop Grumman, and she's also a Northrop Grumman Fellow. In this current role, she leads the development and delivery of responsible artificial intelligence processes and policy across the company. Prior to her current role, she was a responsible artificial intelligence lead for the Northrop Grumman AI campaign. And before that, she was a rocket scientist, actually, at Redondo Beach. She has a PhD in engineering and also a graduate certificate in design thinking for strategic innovation from Stanford University. So Amanda, welcome. I mean, we are very happy that you're with us. Let me kind of kick off this webinar by asking you a question about what Northrop Grumman is actually doing. I mean, how is Northrop Grumman incorporating AI in both its products and managing the organization? Especially just kind of hear some success stories of implementing AI.
Sure. We are, for anyone who doesn't know, Northrop Grumman is a leading global aerospace and defense company, and we've been doing AI for over 40 years. So AI is nothing new to us. We've been incorporating it into our mission solutions with great success. And that's using AI for things that help our customers, help our warfighters to accomplish their mission. So what's new and what's really exciting right now is the public's awareness and understanding of AI and the new opportunities that gives us to integrate AI with our business practices and then continue to grow the integration of AI within our customers' mission space. I want to, this is a webinar on responsible artificial intelligence. So you're going to hear me continue to say that over and over again, that, as much as we are focusing on technology development and pushing forward with the integration of AI into everything that we do, we have to do that ethically and responsibly. So that's a big focus for us right now, is leading the defense industrial base in the integration of responsible AI and AI governance into our practices and how we're applying AI. So some examples of things that we've been doing, using AI as a force multiplier. So using AI in coordination with human beings and teaming AI with human operators to optimize their performance, to automate things that need to be automated and free our operators up to do the things that humans are good at. We believe our value proposition is our understanding of the mission. So I think where Northrop Grumman has seen success in our integration of AI, it's partnering with innovative companies like NVIDIA that are pushing the boundaries of AI technology development and then integrating that into our mission solutions and using our knowledge and expertise around our customers' mission to accomplish what we need them to accomplish. So, focusing on the things that will enable our warfighters to make better decisions faster in highly contested environments, building out systems and systems of systems that integrate AI. We build some of the largest and most complex platforms, the B-21, the James Webb Space Telescope. Those are all, and then, we have things that go everywhere from undersea to outer space. And there are AI applications and potential AI applications in, all of those. And then there's, even though we're unique and we build these exquisite solutions for our customers, we're also a large business, just like any other large business. We have HR, we have business management, we have, financial functions. So we are also applying AI to help us do those things better. So, using AI in our HR processes to be a force multiplier for our staffing organizations. But as you can imagine, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, when we're dealing with sensitive types of data, and that includes, national security data, and it also includes personal information, PII, when we're talking about using things for HR functions, we have to secure that data and that information, make sure that we are not releasing it where it shouldn't be released. And I think where we have an advantage is that because we build these exquisite solutions, because we are used to operating in a national security space, our entire culture is around protecting data and protecting information. So we're applying those same principles to our business process to great success. Another area where we've seen some early successes is in our application of AI to manufacturing. We have several large manufacturing facilities. AI allows us to do early identification of defects, to do defect prediction, to speed our ability to operate the manufacturing line, and to do that with greater accuracy. And there's a lot of new opportunity coming with generative AI and all of these applications. So, we've been doing AI for 40 years. We're incorporating generative AI into a lot more of these applications as well.
So you've touched upon lots of things. I mean, not just, how AI is being used for your, core kind of mission, producing fighter planes and various other technologies, but also in actually running the company itself.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're talking about responsible AI, but to kind of take a slight digression, how easy was it to actually incorporate these new developments in AI? I mean, I know AI has been around for a long, long time. I mean, my previous life, I actually have built expert systems, and I've actually solved problems using neural nets and all these kind of things. But over the last 10 years, things have accelerated significantly. I mean, mostly because the power of computers, because how cheap storage has become, and also companies like NVIDIA who are coming up with new semiconductors and platforms that helps us do things much, much faster. But going back to the premise of my question, I mean, has it been easy because you're a technology-based company to incorporate AI, or has there been a lot of things that management has to do to kind of convince people that AI actually would make a positive difference rather than become a kind of a challenge for the way they do work and the way you run the company?
Yeah, whether I would say it's easy or not probably depends on the day. With the integration of any kind of technology, there are always challenges. I think we were well positioned for the rise of AI as a company because we, like you said, we're a technology company. We do technology development, and we're set up for adopting new technologies and integrating them into mission solutions. We also have the advantage that we have a very tech-savvy CEO who was very forward-leaning on AI and stood up our enterprise AI campaign more than 5 years ago, when the general public didn't know how to spell AI, and it was the domain of super focused technical individuals. And she said, we need to accelerate our adoption of AI at this company, and we're going to put a focus on doing that. We've been doing it in pockets, but we need to move forward as a single one Northrop Grumman in our adoption of AI. And our AI campaign allowed us to do that. And so we were well positioned when ChatGPT came out and suddenly AI was all anybody was talking about. We had already done that groundwork. We had already put together our responsible AI working group and our high-level AI strategy. And so when ChatGPT came out, when the hype around AI really accelerated, we could just take off running because we were already in a position to be able to do that. We had also been part of the conversation, the public conversation around AI. We were involved with some of the early drafts of the NIST AI risk management framework. And those early drafts predated ChatGPT. So we kind of saw the importance of this technology and how it could benefit our company and our mission. And we kept involved in all of what was going on so that we could continue to shape that and move it forward. So from that perspective, I think it was easy, but we had to do that groundwork to get there to where it's, we were able to run now.
So what I'm hearing is, especially for those who are not from the defense industry, that you really need a new technology like this, a new transformative technology, to be championed at the highest levels of the company, and also to do a lot of the groundwork. I mean, you can't simply say, here's a vision statement. You need to do a lot of the groundwork to make people open and adaptable to these new technologies, especially AI today, coming into the workplace. Can you describe a few of the challenges that Northrop Grumman has had to face? I mean, I know you touched a little on data privacy. We'll get back to that in a minute, but just in general, what kind of challenges you had to face and overcome? Because this is another thing that the audience would be very interested in knowing.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is being able to act with enough speed to keep up with people's desire to use this technology. So we are a company that takes security very seriously. Our employees all understand that. At the same time, they're all using ChatGPT on their phones at home. I have ChatGPT on my phone. It's exciting technology, and we can see the opportunities that come with being able to use that in our work. And that includes all 100,000 of our employees. There are potential applications for using generative AI technology for all 100,000 in their daily work. We have people who are looking at ways to integrate it into our customers' mission, and they want to do that fast. They want to do it now. So one of the challenges we've had is communicating that we are bringing these technologies into the company and we're working as fast as we can. But we need to make sure that we're doing it safely and securely, and it's not going to be tomorrow. So having that open line of communication with our employees to say, here's what you're going to get, here's when you're going to get it, and here's why you don't have it now, has been one of the challenges we've had. But good coordination amongst the different functions of our company has allowed us to be able to do that. I work very closely with our legal team and with our communications team, and with our compliance team to help us get that message out. And then also to get the demand signal back to help us to prioritize so that we can deliver things as quickly as we possibly can. So one of the areas that we've prioritized is generative AI for code generation. We've seen, the articles and the statistics out there that, that can provide a great productivity boost. We have a large number of software engineers at our company. We have an even larger number of people who code, either, just writing scripts or, doing other types of development, even if they don't have a software engineering job title. So we expedited that. We made that the #1 priority to get that capability into the company. But one of the challenges that comes with that, a lot of commercial companies that are developing AI software and generative AI software, they're building them for the masses and for commercial companies. They're not building them for use within the defense space.
Right.
So, we can't always just grab something off the shelf and integrate it. We have to work with the vendor to ensure that they've, done all the necessary steps to make sure that it's secure. In a lot of cases, we need to have on-premise solutions. We can't use things that are software as a service. And many of the generative AI tools out there are constructed that way. So, we have to move quickly and work with our vendors to be able to bring those capabilities in as quickly as we possibly can. And we've seen some successes already with doing that. We did a pilot with using generative AI for code development, and we saw not only a 40% increase in productivity from our developers, but they were also happier. They really enjoyed using generative AI in their development environment. It took away some of the annoying tasks that they have to do, like remembering syntax, commenting code. They could use the generative AI to help them with commenting. They could use it for translating from one coding language to another. We have a lot of employees who've been doing software development for a long time and are really, really well versed in one coding language. But when a new one comes along, there's a learning curve, and this is helping them along that learning curve. So, we have to overcome these challenges, but I think the return on investment to that is absolutely worth it in a lot of the cases that we're looking at.
Yeah, that's a really good example, actually. In fact, I guess we could have an entire webinar on using, generative AI for software development, right? Because obviously, on the one hand, it helps the way you suggested, and I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned. But then as you well aware that you still need to supervise the output, right? Because you never know, because sometimes ChatGPT kind of generative AI in general kind of starts writing things that may not necessarily may sound very good in syntax, but may not be exactly the right sequence in terms of logic and so on. And especially if you're in the kind of sensitive areas like defense and security and so on, you want to make sure that some things don't completely go off. So, as a segue, do you have a kind of a formalized system to assess, manage, and model risk when you use AI? I mean, is this something that you kind of find out and then try to fix, or is there a system that you have created over time to do this in a lot more structured and formal way? And if you can share, I mean, you don't have to share things that are confidential, obviously, but whatever you can share would be very, very informative.
Absolutely, yes, we do. We have a process for doing AI governance and AI risk management, and it is governed by our AI governance procedure, which is a published document, part of our principles and operating practices. So it is mandatory for all employees to comply with. It applies to anyone who is developing, procuring, or using AI. So it covers kind of the entire AI life cycle. And that procedure is governed by our values as a company. So, and those values are, we do the right thing, we do what we promise, we commit to shared success, and we pioneer. So those were the guiding principles that we used when we developed that procedure. We also looked at the NIST AI risk management framework as a guiding set of principles. And a lot of what's in that framework is just good systems engineering and good software engineering. It's intended to be comprehensive. So, if you're a company that is, smaller or relatively new to software development, they wanted to cover all of that. But a lot of what was in there, we were already doing, having a risk management structure, having a terms and conditions for software acquisition. And then there were some pieces of it though that are AI specific. And when we created our AI governance procedure, we specifically took those pieces and used that to guide our formation of our AI governance committee. The committee looks at use cases for new uses of artificial intelligence, and that includes use cases for things that we're buying from the outside. If we're bringing in an AI tool from a vendor, and also if we're developing AI from inside the company. And we're evaluating those use cases against our responsible AI principles, which are, number one, the AI needs to be human-centered. So it needs to augment human intelligence and human capability and human performance. And human beings need to be involved in the development or the procurement process from the beginning. So we're not letting AI run our AI. It needs to be secure. We've talked about that a bit already. We deal with a lot of sensitive data at our company, and we need to make sure that that's secure. It needs to be accountable. So we need to provide auditability. And we are collecting evidence against all of these requirements and storing it in a common repository so that we can both review from the beginning to say, is this a tool or a platform or a use that we are going to allow? And then also to continue to monitor it as we move forward. Fourth principle is robust. So the AI needs to be fit for purpose. We don't use AI for the sake of AI. It has to have a specific purpose, and it has to work the way we say it's going to work. And if it fails, then we need to have a backup plan, and in a way to take the AI offline, or have a human being take over if necessary. And then the fifth principle is equitable. So we need our AI to not have disparate impact with different groups of people. We need to ensure that we are testing for bias and that we're actively working to mitigate bias. And there is bias in all AI. Anybody who says that there's no bias is sorely mistaken. It's always there. So you need to make sure that you know where it is, that you've worked to mitigate it, and that you've ensured that the risk for that bias to create disparate impact is actively mitigated against. So we're evaluating all of our new AI solutions against those principles, also against any relevant legislation. So if our AI solution is being deployed in the EU, then we need to evaluate it against the EU AI Act. If it's being used in the state of Colorado, there's a new Colorado law that's governing the use of AI, particularly in hiring systems. So we're in close collaboration with our legal team, who helps us to understand what laws and regulations apply for a particular use case. And then we evaluate it once we gather the evidence against all of these things. And our stakeholders have been, are very busy gathering all of the evidence and providing it. Then it gets reviewed by a diverse committee. So we have representatives from our IT organization, diversity, equity, and inclusion, human resources, cybersecurity, privacy, compliance, legal, and then any other domain subject matter experts that we need to bring in. Now, this may sound like a lot of overhead, and it definitely is, especially at the beginning, but we're working to streamline it as much as possible, and then also bring in tools to help us automate a lot of the evidence provisions, so that if we're looking for evidence of accuracy and robustness, that we're bringing that in automatically, so it's not somebody that needs to copy and paste something.
Yeah, very good. I mean, I had written a set of questions. I also see questions from the audience, and we'll get to that perhaps in about 10 minutes or so, or 10-15 minutes. And you answered a lot of those questions already. So, but I want to kind of ask you to repeat something, and also drill down on something, right? So the thing is, I just want to explain to people who don't know, NIST, of course, stands for the National Institute for Standards and Technology. They do have a report. I think it's in the public domain. Yeah, I guess you can go to the NIST website and, find out about, principles of using AI. Do you know the name of the report at all? Or do you remember the name of the report?
Yeah, so it's the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, and there is an accompanying site. So if you just Google NIST AI RMF, you'll be able to find it.
Sure, no problem. I think your picture may be a little frozen. You're back again. Okay. Okay. So that I wanted everybody to know what that is. And the second is, you spoke about a whole bunch of principles, 5 principles. This, I presume, was put together through the AI Governance Committee at Northrop Grumman, right?
Yes.
And without explaining all the principles, can you just very quickly tell me, here are 5, now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that people remember what you just said.
Yep, absolutely.
I'll ask you to repeat this.
Sure. Human-centered, secure, accountable, robust, and equitable.
All right, very nice, very good.
Yep.
So it seems to me that Northrop Grumman is kind of in the almost like the leading edge of trying to ensure that not only do you adopt AI, and especially the most recent new developments in AI like generative AI, ChatGPT, and so on, but also to make sure that when you adopt AI, that you're doing it in a responsible way. And you kind of defined already what is responsible. I mean, those principles certainly reflect that, right? Now, of course, everybody would kind of be interested in, are these the kind of guardrails that are useful for most companies? Are there things that you discovered while developing these principles that may be portable and may be not so portable because they're very specific? And I want to attach to that the thing that you also touched on, which is that you did mention, and I want to emphasize this, that if you're working as an international global company, you have to deal with EU law, and you have to deal with maybe today UK law, which is kind of different. And I know that countries like China and India have also their own laws. I mean, meaning not laws, but things that govern the use of AI.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you kind of talk a little bit about how much of what you are doing is, I mean, I don't know if it's easy or not, is portable, and how much of it did you kind of have to really think very specifically about your own company?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. So when we formed our 5 principles, we were primarily looking at a couple of different references for what we needed to bring in. And one was the Department of Defense's ethical principles around AI. They're similar, but slightly different. There's our responsible, equitable, traceable, reliable, and governable.
Right.
All of which are applicable, and I can map any one of those to our 5 principles. We wanted to make sure we aligned with those, but could also expand, because they're focused on, mission uses of AI. So we absolutely have to comply with that as we're developing things to serve our customers' mission. But we also needed to look at it from the perspective of enterprise use of AI. So we felt we needed to, be a little bit more expansive in how we looked at that. We were also looking at the intelligence community's AI risk management framework, or their responsible AI framework. We looked at principles and frameworks from a number of commercial companies that share their principles publicly, companies like Google and IBM. And then we, as I mentioned, we're focusing on the NIST AI risk management framework, which also lays out a set of principles. So we didn't do it in a vacuum. We were looking at what was out there in the marketplace. And then we also socialized it amongst all of the different types of stakeholders around our company with our technical fellows, our key technical leaders at the company. We socialized it with the stakeholders that I talked about who are now part of our AI governance committee: diversity, equity, and inclusion, HR, privacy, cybersecurity. So we didn't start out with 5 and they stayed the same. We had a lot of iteration that happened over the course of about a year from the time we first formulated the concept to when we published our AI governance procedure. But we felt like there was a necessity to tailor those principles to the work that we do as a company. In the particular and unique types of solutions that we build, and also to align with our corporate values and make sure that all of that is reflected within those 5 principles. So unfortunately, beyond saying what the 5 principles are, we are not currently sharing our full AI governance procedure publicly, but we do have a webpage that we can provide the link to that goes into a little bit more detail on the types of things that we do to execute those.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you, I know somebody had asked, sent an email asking what kind of advice would you give a CEO, of a business? And a lot of what you've mentioned talks about how you get to where you've got to, as well as how to make sure that you not only adopt AI, but also do it in a responsible way. Now, there are some industries for who what you call auditability, they might call it explainability, is very important, because just think, I mean, if you're using AI in the healthcare industry and you make a diagnosis, then you need to be able to explain, here's the reason I did it, not just I had this amazing AI system which uses millions and millions of pieces of data, and based on all that, this is the best diagnosis. You need to be able to explain. How much of that is important for a company like Northrop Grumman? Because is that really important? Because perhaps your customers are not as interested in. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm not asking the question the right way, but how does explainability? If you can talk a little bit about that, which I think you did talk about. Auditability is kind of related.
Related, but I think they're sort of different concepts. When I think about auditability and accountability, it's related to the development and the governance of the solution itself. So do we know that we can trust the data that came in to train the solution? Do we have a good understanding that that data represents a good approximation of the real world, so that we can trust the solutions that come out of the AI? Do we know that who has access to the AI system, and that they should have access to it, that they have a right to insights on the data that we're using? So, a lot of this is good data architecture and good data governance and hygiene. So that's what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about auditability and accountability. Explainability, I'm thinking about more from the user perspective and the human-centered perspective. So does the person who's interacting with that AI system understand the output that's coming from it? And have they calibrated their level of trust in that system? You don't want people to mistrust the solutions they're using, because if they do, then why are you even using the solution or the system? You need to go back to the design phase and figure out where that mismatch is. But you also don't want people to overtrust. And this is particularly important with generative AI, which does hallucinate. So it creates things that are inaccurate. It's all generative AI doing is predicting the next most likely word in a sentence. It's not the most correct or the most accurate. It's just a plausible response to the prompt that it's given. So you need your human users to be understanding of that, and have enough understanding of how the AI is coming up with the answer it's giving to be able to calibrate their trust appropriately. And I actually don't like the term explainability, because I've been married for 20 years. I explain things to my husband all the time, and he doesn't get half of it. So what's more important is that it's interpreted on the other side. We need to look at it from the perspective of that human user. Can they interpret, and can they make decisions based on the output? Because that's the perspective we want. It's enabling that human user and giving them the necessary information and trust they need to be able to make those decisions.
All right. Let me ask a couple of other things, and then we'll turn it over to the audience questions, okay? So you spoke a little bit about having your legal team involved as well, obviously, because that's really, really important.
Mhm.
So there are two things about the legal aspect. One, of course, is liability. Again, I mean, you're dealing with the government as the main customer. So the liability issues may not be as paramount, but nevertheless, most commercial companies are dealing with various stakeholders, customers in particular, perhaps even employees. And you are dealing with employees too. If you have AI that's in your HR system, then what kind of things have you thought about? What kind of considerations have gone into the issue of liability on the one hand? And let me add another question to this. The second one is intellectual property rights. Intellectual property. Now, there is, as you know, a huge case going on about Google using all the stuff that's on there.
Mhm.
Search data, search history, and that somehow that there is a level of intellectual property that perhaps is being violated. I mean, the judgment has not come out yet. But in the kind of things that Northrop Grumman is doing, and then if you can project it to, if you're giving advice to somebody outside, how do you deal with these two things? So intellectual liability
Mhm.
on the one hand, and then intellectual property rights on the
Yeah.
other.
Yeah, I think they're both really important concepts and things to pay attention to, particularly when, we're looking at this a lot when we're procuring software from others, because, we know the provenance of our data. We know where it came from. We know the level of accuracy of it. It's a little more opaque when we're procuring something from an outside company. So this is where our legal team has really been super active, is in working with these vendors and establishing the terms and conditions we have with them on the accountability on who has accountability for the data that's coming in. If you're not going to give us access to that data as a vendor, then you need to maintain that accountability and provide us with enough information that we can trust that you have the rights to use the data that you use to train your model, and that future iterations you're going to adhere to the same principles or allow us an update and another look at it. So in a lot of cases, as we're bringing these AI tools in, the long pole in the tent isn't necessarily the technology and getting the security guardrails up. It's those terms and conditions, and spending a lot of time going back and forth with the vendors to say, like, no, we need that level of security. And what we're starting to see with some of our vendors is that they are accepting the liability. So if we have an AI coding tool, they have accepted the liability that if their generative AI platform creates anything that violates someone's intellectual property rights, they accept the accountability for that. So we're starting to see more and more of that. But it's something that we have to actively look for and ask for, because if we don't have control over the data that's being used to train the system, we need to make sure that we're protected in case something goes wrong. Now, that's not to say that, even if we do have that limitation of liability on our side, that's not to say that we still won't have reputational damage if something were to go wrong. If we're the face of it, and something goes the way it shouldn't go, it's, still our name on the line. So we need to look at the potential for what could go wrong. We refer to this as red teaming and bringing in a lot of diverse perspectives to help think about what the unintended consequences could be, so that we can decide how we're going to mitigate those and what we will do if that happens in the future. So, and this is risk management. You have to identify what the risks are going to be, and identify what the mitigation steps are so that you can move forward and determine how you're going to address that risk.
Okay, and on intellectual property rights, I mean, do you have to deal with intellectual property rights related to AI, or are there lots of different people saying, look, you don't have the entire intellectual property rights. So we have portions of it because you have used portions of either ChatGPT, I mean, some OpenAI software, or you use something else, or you use my data.
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
do IP, intellectual property?
Yeah, again, it comes down to the terms and conditions and what types of data and what types of platforms we allow into the company. We don't give our employees access to all types of generative AI tools, and in part for this reason, because we need to be able to guarantee that we have the rights to anything that's generated by the generative AI. We need to make sure that the provider of that generative AI tool or platform had the rights to the data that they used to train it. And for a lot of commercially available platforms, that's not the case. So we need to, in order to mitigate that risk, we need to make sure that we're only using the types of platforms where we can ensure that the platform provider had the rights to the data they used to train it, and that we will have the rights to the data that comes out of it. And when we're working with our government customers, in a lot of cases, we're going to need to transfer those rights to the government. So we would need to make sure that that's something that we're able to do with the platforms that we're using.
All right, very nice. I mean, we've spoken about a lot of things, and I really want to thank you. I mean, it's been a very informative, and obviously you have full control over what's going on as well in terms of, how you explain things was really, really very good. I mean, some of the questions I asked you were questions also that came by email to us, but I see a bunch of Q&A questions here as we were talking to each other. So let me ask you a few of these, and then we will. So one of the questions is a bit long. It says it's from Toby Hawes. How do you set permissions for different levels of the company? So, for example, if an executive uses AI to answer a strategic question based off of the financials of the company, how do you prevent someone who's not an executive to ask questions that an executive should only know the response to?
Yeah.
Are you able to set permission to available data with AI? Now, this is a very good question, because one of the things that's happened, not simply about AI, but in the world at large, is that everybody has access to everything, right? There's a lot of stuff floating around. And also people, I mean, software has become very user-friendly. So I can ping. I mean, I've been unnerved many times when I walk into a room and somebody has looked at my name, and while they're talking to me, they've Googled my name and they know everything about me. So how do you set these kind of different levels of permission in the use of AI in an organization? Or have you thought about this?
Oh, yeah, we've absolutely thought about it. And it comes down to good data governance and good data hygiene. I mean, AI operates on data. Data is I've heard it said data is the new oil. Data is how you do AI. And I think you mentioned it early in the call too, that part of the reason we have this growth of AI is because of the growth of data and the availability of data and our ability to increase our compute power to manage all of that data. So our AI access to data is a natural extension of our data governance processes. So, we have data embedded in hundreds of tools across our enterprise, financial data, HR data, and even within, if we use HR data as an example, myself, I have access to my own personal data in our HR system. My manager has access to my data and all of the rest of his employees' data, and probably some additional information about our performance that I'm not privy to as an individual contributor. So even within a single platform, you have multiple different levels of data access. So when we apply AI to these platforms, it's the same extension of those data access policies. And I think we have to be very careful when we are putting in AI systems that can operate with different data sources that we apply that same level of governance and that same level of hygiene when we are combining sources of data. And this is particularly important when we are dealing with, not only sensitive company data, but classified data. And, this is one of the reasons why we need to have on-premise uses of particular AI platforms. If we're going to use AI in a classified environment, it needs to live within that environment and only have access to data within that environment. So, and none of this is new to us. We do this all the time, and AI is just a natural extension of that. But I think for a company that's maybe not used to using data in this way and not used to having the necessary divisions between types of data, it may take a little bit of extra design and effort up front, but it's necessary.
Okay, a couple of other quick things. An anonymous attendee said, well, what are your thoughts on using generative AI to create engineering training materials within the organization? And are you concerned about using this approach? So, what, I think the reason for this concern is if you're using generative AI, right, that there is a little danger. Again, depends on whether you have it from open AI, open sources, or whether you are putting some kind of, something around it to make sure that it doesn't leave. So, because otherwise, people who create the training data might know a lot more about your company than you want them to know. So, are you using generative AI to create training data?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if the question is around using generative AI to generate training data for other AI applications, or if it's around using generative AI to generate training for human employees. So I'll answer both because I think both are interesting concepts. Generative AI is, I'll answer the second one first. So creating training for humans. I think generative AI is a great application for creating ideas, for kind of doing brainstorming, for helping us to create new concepts and aid the humans who are doing a design approach. So we're absolutely using generative AI for things like that. But as with all applications of generative AI, and we are training our employees on this, the human being is responsible for the output. So, whether they're using generative AI for coding, whether they're using generative AI to create a training module, they are responsible for that output. So they need to review it, they need to iterate on it, they need to make sure that it's accurate. Whether that's for training, whether it's for anything else, that's the case. Now I'll answer the other definition of training, where are we using generative AI to create training data for other types of applications? And the answer to that is absolutely yes as well. Given the types of solutions that we build, we don't always have access to a large corpus of data to train our AI algorithms. If we're trying to build a target recognition algorithm that operates in a contested environment, we can't go knocking on our adversary's door and say, hey, can you share some images of your platforms with us? It's not going to happen. We also, to use the manufacturing use case I talked about earlier, in a lot of cases, we don't have a lot of defective parts. That's a good thing. But if we're trying to design an AI algorithm that helps us identify defective parts or helps us to predict defective parts, we need more training data than what we have available. So generative AI is a potential solution to help us build out that corpus of data and allow us to train our deductive or predictive non-generative AI algorithms. But the same principle applies. You have to review, you have to make sure that it's accurate, and you have to continue to do testing to ensure that you're getting the outputs that you're looking for.
Sure. A very short answer to this next question. And then I think Robert Brammer has his hand up, so I need to get to him. Do you really use third-party vendors to verify and monitor the performance of your AI? I guess security is very important for you, right? And
it is. And if I gave the impression that we were doing that, that was my bad, because we are not using third-party vendors to
But
verify
do
the
you
security.
recommend companies to do that? I mean, some people are not in your space, but maybe a commercial company.
Yeah, we have seen some of our vendors, our commercial companies, call in an outside party to do an audit. And I think that's appropriate in some cases. And it's a way to understand if you are, to be objective and to know if you're following the necessary best practices, help you to identify potential issues that you can't see because you've been so focused on the happy path for so long. So yes, we're absolutely seeing other companies do that. And it could be a good thing for helping to do AI governance.
Sure. All right, Robert, go ahead. I mean, you have your hand raised, so we'll let you have the last question.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Bob.
As a committee chair in the Science and Technology Law section of the American Bar Association, I have occasions to work with the interaction of security and privacy, and in particular dealings with the International Association of Privacy Professionals and assorted security organizations, trying to get the legal framework straight to balance security and privacy. So how are you dealing with that?
Well, number one, IAPP has been a real leader in the AI governance space. So if anyone is looking for more information about AI governance, in addition to looking up the NIST AI risk management framework, take a look at the wealth of materials that IAPP has put together. I think there are definite challenges that come with not only security and privacy, but also good data governance and privacy. So I'll give an example. When we're talking about bias and mitigating bias, one of the most common things I hear when I ask, what are you doing to understand and mitigate bias? People will say, well, we just anonymized all the data. That way, we're not going to, we're going to maintain people's privacy. We're not going to disclose any personal information. And therefore we can't be biased. And I'm like, no, that's not how that works. If you've anonymized the data, you don't know.
Oh, no, I think, Amanda, I think you got cut off.
In some way. Oh, did I freeze again?
Sorry.
Am I back? Okay.
You're back. Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, most data sets are biased in some way. So you've got this challenge between keeping private information private and knowing enough information to be able to say where your biases might exist, and knowing enough of the demographic information to be able to do that kind of testing. So this is where a close coordination and collaboration is necessary between AI governance teams and privacy professionals and security to make sure that you can get that information, but keep it safe and secure, only have it accessible to the people who need to have access to it in order to understand where the risks might be, where the biases might exist, and how they're going to mitigate that. So I think to get back to answering the question, that close collaboration is absolutely necessary. And every single one of those functions needs to have an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish with the AI system so that they know how to mitigate the potential risks.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. I'm going to end this webinar by asking you a question that I should have asked right at the beginning. So, but I kept it to the end. And this is your chance to come up with this punchline, like a mission statement. I mean, how do you define responsible AI? And I'm sure you have written these lines many times. I'm sorry to ask you to repeat it, but what is responsible AI, especially from the perspective of perhaps Northrop Grumman, but even more general?
Yeah, I mean, the Northrop Grumman line on responsible AI would be, AI that adheres to our 5 responsible AI principles. But I'll try to summarize from Amanda's view what is responsible AI. It is AI that is fit for purpose, So it works for the application to which it's being applied. It's AI that is secure and robust to attack or deviation from that stated purpose. And it's AI that works the same for everyone or has equitable impacts for everyone that uses it. And buried within that are accuracy and reliability and all the rest. But if I had to boil it down to three things, it would be those. It's fit for purpose, it's secure, and it does not create disparate impact for the people who are using it.
All right, I think with this, we will bring this webinar to an end. This has been really fabulous. I thought, you touched upon a whole variety of things, and I'm sure you've given the audience a lot of material, lots of food for thought, and also, I mean, really, I must say, I'm leaving this webinar thinking Northrop Grumman is way in the front line and in the cutting edge, the leading edge of not only using AI for its mission and its activities, but also having the foresight to implement it in a responsible way, and I'm sure no small measure thanks to you. So thank
That's
you
our
very
goal.
much for
So
being our
glad to hear
guest.
it.
And
Thank
on
you.
behalf of the Smith School of Business, let me thank you for spending this hour with us, and also the audience for spending this hour with us.